distinguished guests of honor, fellow congregants, friends, neighbors, and supporters of all kinds. Welcome to our celebration, which marks the completion of the first and most important part of our restoration campaign, a 5-year project costing more than $1 million. As the immediate past president of the synagogue, it has been my honor to be at the helm for the last 5 years, overseeing the restoration, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to share some words of appreciation to all those who have made this moment possible, including Benjamin Miller, who's going to get me through the speech. Hi. As you just heard, over 100 years ago, a group of poor immigrant Jews came together to form a synagogue, which was formally recognized by the Ontario province in 1914 as the first Russian congregation, Rodfei Shalom Anshe Kiev, the people of Kiev, pursuers of peace. In 1917, they acquired this property at the corner of Denison and Bellevue, and in 1923, they began construction of a purpose-built synagogue. This magnificent Torah Ark arrived in 1931, and just a few years later, the compelling zodiac signs and images were painted by a congregant, Frank Silverstein, and his teenage children, one of whom, Mona Goldman, would become an artist of some note in Vancouver. The Kiever synagogue, as it is commonly known, has always been something of a DIY operation. Some of you at the sides may be sitting on pews handcrafted by the original members. And throughout the synagogue are numerous dedications that record a century's worth of support and devotion. The Ark, for example, was donated by the Ladies Auxiliary. The old Torah curtains and the exceptional metal ornaments around the Chazin's platform under the dome bear such names as Auerbach, Bobrowski, Boston, and Cohen, Gershman, Lukács, Mosten, and Ross. All of the synagogue was lovingly restored in the early 1980s under the leadership of Kensington Market's fabled David Pincus, and in very close cooperation with the Toronto Jewish Congress, the predecessor of today's UJA Federation. That story has been carefully recorded by our friends at the Ontario Jewish Archives, so I will simply refer you to their rich website for that chapter of the Kiever's history. Now it has been our turn to preserve the integrity of this historic building and to ensure that it continues to serve as a viable space for the congregation and for the wider community. In 2019, we discovered some water damage up in the balcony. The newly constituted board decided to use the investigation of that leak to do a full-scale assessment of the entire building. We turned to Michael McClellan, principal at ERA Architects, who enthusiastically agreed to work with us. We were so fortunate to have enlisted the ERA team, led by the remarkable Annabelle Vaughn, and in turn our contractors, Roof Tile Management, headed by Blair Britton, and a team overseen on site by Colby Masters. I wish time allowed me to walk you in detail through everything they did. If you want afterwards, I'll be happy to take you around to every nook and cranny. This included rebuilding the distinctive cupolas, redoing the main entrance stairs, and replacing all the rotting window frames on the south facade. And within these frames, Yves Guinan painstakingly restored the glass panels so that they look as fresh as they did 100 years ago. You can see some selected before and after photo details on the posters in the back, which I hope gives some taste of how desperately the building needed attention and how masterful all the work was. We are so grateful for their meticulous efforts, and I'd like to ask the following people to stand. Please don't be shy. Michael McClelland and Annabelle Vaughn for ERA Architects. Blair Britton and Colby Masters for RTM. And Eve, are you here? For the stained glass. Of course, none of this admirable work could have been done without being able to pay for it. Even though I won't be able to get into all the particulars, I do want to sketch the general contours and to communicate our congregation's profound sense of gratitude to the many people and organizations that made this $1 million restoration possible. The City of Toronto Heritage Grant Program made the first important grant, which helped propel us to further substantial awards from the Federal Parks Canada program for heritage places. On the provincial level, certain Ontario initiatives allowed us to access supplemental money targeted for security purposes. In each of these agencies, we were fortunate to work with consummate professionals, and it is no mere formality when we express how blessed we feel to live in Canada with government bodies committed to supporting a religious, cultural, and historical entity like the Kiever Synagogue. These grants, however, had to be matched by our own funds. And those of you who are familiar with the Kiever know that we are a small and not particularly affluent congregation. We took some initial steps, and some of you may remember the delightful Fiddlers for the Roof fundraising event in 2019, which included Susie Schlanger and Swamperella. And the support of many of you in the room today back then was an important catalyst for our subsequent efforts. Here, I have the pleasure of recognizing the vital partnership we have had for many years with UJA Federation and the Ontario Jewish Archives, which for so long has understood the historic value of our building and the role our congregation plays in the life of Jewish Toronto. They have stood by us step by step, and it is an honor to recognize their efforts on behalf of the Kiever. At the risk of embarrassing them, I'd like to ask the following to please stand so that they can accept, on behalf of UJA, our thanks here. Nurit Richolsky, Janice Benatar, Sandra Mappa, Dara Solomon, and Donna Bernardo Cerise. Despite being absent today, we also thank, of course, UJA's Adam Minsky and Steve Schulman and Marion Lupu. Working with UJA, we developed a fundraising strategy that was successful only because so many responded to the call. That kid's got a future in fundraising. We are truly delighted to acknowledge three families above all. Paul and Les Wynn understood the basic principle that without a building, there would simply be no Kiever Synagogue. And so it is fitting that we now gather in the Phil Wynn Heritage Building dedicated in memory of their father. Our thank you is embedded in the fabric of the main entrance. Also embedded in stone is our recognition of Miles Nadal, who from the beginning has appreciated the importance of the Jewish activities that we pursue week in and week out, year in and year out, activities such as today's wonderful celebration that now fall within the umbrella of the Miles Nadal Family Jewish Center. And finally, it is an honor to congregate here in the Isidore and Rosalie Sharp Sanctuary. The Sharps' generosity is legion, and the Kiever is most fortunate to count them among its patrons. We will have an opportunity to hear from our benefactors shortly, but please join me in applauding them all now. As I signaled, we have been the fortunate beneficiaries of so much support. Some of it has come from longtime members like Ellen Greenwood, her family, and the Henry and Bernice Kaufman Foundation, while other important donations have appeared miraculously from people not only in the broader Jewish community, but also from our good-hearted non-Jewish neighbors. Some of your donations have been marked on a Torah scroll cover, a window, or a pew plaque. And though many, many more remain anonymous, we are deeply grateful for the support from every one of you. Indeed, each donation is vital in helping to keep the Kiever Synagogue alive. Working with the Ontario Jewish Archives to host tours and Toronto School Board programs costs money. Partnering with the Shoresh Jewish Environmental Group costs money. Hosting Doors Open Toronto and musical events of all kinds costs money. Every year we build a sukkah that is used by anyone in the downtown Jewish community. And I'm pleased to announce the launch of our newly reorganized library upstairs, which will support a range of literary activities, such as a regular essay contest. But running in the background are hidden costs, like building insurance, which alone costs $21,000 a year. Last year, our annual dues for the Mount Sinai Cemetery were over $7,000, and we also spent $20,000 to repair numerous headstones. We acknowledge and accept our sacred responsibility to past generations. But we also must recognize that those folks aren't pitching in for escalating costs in the present. And unfortunately, as you have seen on the front, sometimes bad things happen to good buildings. Fortunately, RTM had in place a covering system to protect the historic glass itself. But replacing just one sheet of plexiglass costs $3,600. More fortunately, such incidents so far are few and far between because we live in a basically good and tolerant society. For over 100 years, the members of the Kiever Synagogue have tried to make their contribution to that society. They have gathered weekly for Sabbath prayer services and on the holidays. They have extended mutual aid within the congregation and donated to recent causes like Ukraine. We have worked with the Kensington Market Historical Society and the Jazz Festival, and our garden, under the loving care of Jane Townsend, brings delight to neighbors and visitors every single day. There may be other institutions that can lay claim to being Toronto's most beautiful synagogue, but the Kiever is without question the oldest one that has continued to be truly active in the same location for 100 years. With the help of the two more sentences. With the help of the principal donors we honor today, we've ensured that the building will remain in good shape for the next 100 years. Although we still should undertake a second campaign on the west side and complete work on the roof line. But with your help, we will ensure that the Kiever remains a vibrant part of the Kensington Market neighborhood, the Jewish community at large, and the city of Toronto altogether. Thank you. It's time to move on to the next item in the program. Everyone knows, don't worry, this one's short. Everyone knows that on Hanukkah, we light the menorah candles to celebrate how the Hasmonean Jews successfully defeated the Greek Syrians in the pursuit of religious freedom. The menorah is the tangible symbol of the rededicated temple, which the idolaters had defiled and which the Jews needed to clean before using again. In the prayer services for Hanukkah today, we recite Psalm 30 as another way to mark the holiday. It seems appropriate, therefore, that on this special day for the Kiever, when we rededicate our own house of worship, that we recite this particular psalm. And I also need to squeeze in here another special feature, artwork from our dear neighbor Rochelle Rubenstein, which decorates the ark on special occasions like this. Now, to recite Psalm 30, it is a profound honor to call up Pinchas Gutter. For many of you, he needs no introduction. One of Canada's foremost Holocaust educators, Pinchas has become internationally famous for the work he has done, personally and holographically, for the Azrieli Foundation and especially for the Steven Spielberg Shoah Foundation. For those of us at the Kiever, he has been inspiring us for decades as our chazan. We expect to have a more appropriate, dedicated opportunity to honor and celebrate Pinchas Gutter himself, especially if the Canadian government cooperates, which I wasn't supposed to say. But right now, Right now, it is a distinct pleasure to ask him to come to the Bima and grace our rededication with a rendering of Psalm 30. You can find the text on the back of your program. And if you don't have a program, a little boy will go around and sell you one for 10 cents.